Hi friends, I'm Dick Hellman once again with another Washington Bite. As you know, I head CPAC, the Christian Lobby for Israel on Capitol Hill, and Merkel, the Middle East Research Center Limited, which is the think tank that supports CPAC in its strong, unique, and unparalleled issue orientation and support for advocacy for Israel. Now, there's nothing else I can speak about today except the incredible, one might say perseverance, one might say stick-to-itiveness. I just have to say chutzpah, good Jewish or Yiddish phrase for nerve, and not in a positive sense, of our Secretary of State, John Kerry. Now, we respect and pray for our leaders, our President, our Secretary of State, our Secretary of Defense, and more. But I must say on policy grounds that nobody believes that there's any peace agreement to be made between Israel and the PLO. And the latest evidence of this, as many of you have seen, is that just as Secretary Kerry was twisting Israel's arm, saying that he was going to, or implying, or the word was being whispered about, that Jonathan Pollard was going to be released from Durham Prison down in North Carolina after some 29 years of incarceration. And that was going to be the deciding move by the United States that would give Prime Minister Netanyahu some credit with his people for having been able to get Jonathan Pollard released from U.S. federal prison on his espionage charges. And that was supposed to convince the Israelis to jump back into the peace process. Now, there are so many reasons why that was a bad idea. I can't enumerate them in our short Washington Bite. But even Jackson Deal, a moderate, middle-of-the-road, but very bright analyst who writes for the Washington Post, said that it was time for Secretary Kerry to, in effect, get a reality check, get real, look at the real situation, and know that there is no comprehensive peace agreement to be made between Israel and the PLO. But the very day that Secretary Kerry was to run off to Jerusalem and Ramallah once again, it wasn't Israel who did anything to block the peace talks, but it was Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, the head of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority, who suddenly went off on another wild tender, as he always does, and signed 16 treaties that the UN has open for signature by states. So in effect, he was saying, we now have a nation, and I'm going to sign these 16 treaties. Now, the irony of it, which would be humorous if it wasn't so sad and tragic, was that reliable analysts say that he and the PLO and the Palestinian Authority are in violation of 15 of the 16 treaties he just signed. But that doesn't bother him. He was going to wreck the whole idea of peace talks. Now, so there is no peace to be made, as everybody agrees, except perhaps Secretary Kerry. Mahmoud Abbas does not want to make peace, and everybody likes the present situation in which they kind of muddle through. And the economy is good, their security is good, the relationships between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs and the Israeli Arab citizens, while not perfect, is pretty good. So nobody except Secretary John Kerry thinks that it's important, with everything else happening in the world, from Russia taking the Crimea from Ukraine to Syria butchering hundreds of thousands of their own citizens and causing on the order of some 10 million refugees, a third of the population, and Iran on the brink of developing nuclear weapons. This is the last thing that should have a priority. Now, you and I believe, agree that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people. And there is and never was any Palestinian people since the ancient Philistines. And so there is really no reason in history, in law, in international policy, or in the U.S. geopolitical and strategic interests for us to be pushing to create a new, unstable, terror-sponsoring mini-state right in Israel's heartland, which will be a great disadvantage and threat to America and to peace in the Middle East, not to mention Israel. So I guess I have to tell you, in case you hadn't noticed, that I'm not mincing any words. This is a terrible idea that Secretary Kerry and Martin Indyk and some others around the president keep dragging up. But it is not producing peace. In fact, it is producing war, terror, and hatred. Because every time they run this idea out and nothing happens, all the Palestinian Arabs are being incited to hatred, terror, and war, not only against Israel and the Jewish people, but against us in the West. Time for a whole new idea. We'll talk about that next time. And if you want to see more of it on the ground, take a look at our websites on our new mission coming up August 1st to the 11th in Israel with a 3-day add-on to Eilat and Petra. You won't have a better mission to Israel and the Middle East at a better price than that, so I hope you'll come with me. God bless you, and we'll talk again next week.